My name is Aidan Jai, and I have today the honor of moderating our session on the role of government in shaping tomorrow. I head public policy at Meta, and so my role is basically to try to explain to business what governments do and vice versa. So it's an honor really to be here. So I have next to me Ambassador Boateng, former Ghanaian ambassador to the Republic of China. Welcome.
Thank you.
I have the Executive Governor of Oyo State, His Excellency Makinde. Welcome.
Thank you.
I have the High Commissioner, Linda Scott from Namibia. Welcome, High Commissioner.
Thank you.
And I also have the High Commissioner Buyinge, High Commissioner of Rwanda in the UK. Welcome, High Commissioner.
Thank you so much.
Well, without further ado, I would say let's jump in, right? Africa has 65% of the world's remaining uncultivated land. We have the youngest population in the world, and we know that our continent is a continent of opportunity, it's a continent of potential, and it's likely to be the continent of the future. But I have to be honest, and I might get into trouble for saying that as someone who works in business and government. When we think about business and government, we think about it in terms of risk. So often our work is around how do we make sure that the government doesn't mess up? And I hear a lot of that from entrepreneurs who want to get into business who are saying, look, I would do it, but when I think of my government, I'm just discouraged. Let's start by reshaping the narrative. What is the role of government? What is your role, Excellencies, as being an enabling force for business?
Thank you very much, Ida. And I also like to thank the organizers for the invitation to participate in this very important event. I think the role of government is to be an enabler. The role of government, as I put it, is to develop the highways so that private entrepreneurship can thrive. I've worked as on the corporate side. I've also run my own businesses, not only in Ghana, but in about 5 or 6 African countries. Now, I am in government, so I understand the dynamics. I believe that African businesses should hold hands with their governments. I mean, you cannot build a successful business without the enabling environment, and therefore it's important that we all work together. Sometimes the dots don't connect, but I believe that it's the responsibility of the bright minds in this hall today to connect those dots, and if the dots connect, then you can also build your businesses. But also, you are in the right place at the right time. When I started working in Africa 32 years ago, the African address was not fashionable, and transportation was difficult, telecommunication was difficult. I mean, everything was difficult. But today there are opportunities, and as your dean said earlier, how do you make that impact from within? And I believe that if you look at being a problem solver, whatever you want to do, you can achieve your dreams. But you have to also think outside the box. You cannot take Oxford or you cannot take London to Ghana or Kenya or Lagos and expect to be successful. But the question is, whatever you are learning here, how do you go back and unpack it so that you can be successful? When I started out in media, almost every African country had only one broadcasting station, which was owned by the government. But we were determined in those days because we had a visionary founder that was the chairman of our company, Ted Turner, who felt that we could use media and as an enabler. And our key product at that time was CNN. But we also realized that CNN was going to criticize the government. So how do you do it? So we decided that let's also help the African media industry in our own small ways. I mean, today when I look back and I look at Nollywood, and you go to Jamaica, you go to China, and you turn on your radio and you see Nigerian movies, you see Ghanaian movies. Those were some of the ideas at that time, but it was thinking outside the box. With CNN, we're able to change the entire African media landscape. And today, I mean, most of you take it for granted, but you have private media, you have free media in most of your countries. When we started, it wasn't like that. So I think the opportunities are there, and whatever you want to do, you have to think big. I mean, one of my passions right now is when I was in China, and a lot of my contemporaries, my age group, would say that, Ambassador, we used to go to bed hungry. And I would go to these banquets or even normal home dinners, and there would be 15, 16 course meals, for those of you who know China, you know. They bring, and I'd ask myself, how were they able to do it? So I came back to Ghana and I said, at least for the rest of the time that the good Lord will give me, I should make sure that no Ghanaian child goes to bed hungry. And it's doable. So I decided to look at the Greek food chain. And you realize that we're just not doing anything. Because as I sit here, almost 50 to 60% of farm produce in Ghana with a very rudimentary farming system still doesn't get to the market. So how do we change that distribution system? How do we make sure that those poor farmers can make enough to look after their children? It means that bright minds like you have to take up the marketing responsibility. You have to take up the storage responsibility. We should be able to farm yam, farm plantain, and keep it for the next 3 to 4 years. It shouldn't just rot after 3 to 4 weeks. So I think whatever sector you take, as the previous speaker said, whatever sector, there is an opportunity, and it's up to you to make it happen and happen in your own way. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Boateng. There was a lot there, thinking outside the box, but also calling to the young mind in this room. Governor Makinde, I'll go to you because you have direct experience in that, right? You were a business executive, then you moved now to government. And Ambassador Boateng said it, government should be, in principle, that's what we learn in government school, an enabler to business. Does it really happen? How do you think about it in the context of Oyo State?
Well, thank you, Aida. And also, it's my pleasure of being in front of the bright minds here. Yes, government should be an enabler, but apart from that, government should set the tone. When I was coming into government, and by the way, all my life, I've been in private business until 5 years ago, when my life was turned upside down by getting into to government. As we were coming in, of course, nobody had any trust in me. They said, this guy hasn't done anything in government. He hasn't been a councillor. He hasn't been an assembly member, not a senator, but he wants to govern this state. So it was a big challenge. So what I did was I put it in black and white. I said, look, this is a roadmap. This is the guide for us for accelerated development of Oyo State, 2019 to 2023. And we followed through. By the end of my first tenure, and we were going for re-election, I dusted that up, and then we prepared also another roadmap for sustainable development of Oyo State, 2023 to 2027. So the government will have to go beyond, just talking or the textbook answers. You have to, in practical terms, go out there and say, this is what we're going to do, sell it to your members, and you follow through. And few things that we put in the roadmap. We said, okay, look, guys, we have to look at 4 major pillars, to accelerate development in Oyo State. And by the way, Oyo State is a subnational. It's a state in Nigeria, about over 28,000 square kilometers. I was talking to the ambassador just as we're preparing for this, and I said, look, Oyo State is bigger than at least 13 to 14 African countries. So, and in terms of landmass and in terms of population, we're close to 8-9 million people. So that could well be, a country. So we said we're going to focus on 4 major pillars: health, education, security, and expansion of our economy, using where we think we have that comparative advantage, which is agribusiness. So we listed out the things that we were going to achieve, on those major pillars, and we were held accountable. So also, because I came from the private sector, you know that there's quite a lot of inefficiencies in government business. When you say you're going to do something, and then my first experience was they brought a file to me and said, "Please, can you approve this?" So I approved it. Let's go get it done. And then a few weeks later, they brought another file to approve again what I already approved, Because what I approved initially was approval in principle. And now, this is the real approval. And then you're going to come again and say, now the real approval, we have it. Please approve that we should go ahead. So you have to cut out those inefficiencies. You have to ensure that, because most of us, our tenure, is you have time limitation. So what you can't get done within a certain time frame, you cannot guarantee that the next administration will be interested in what you're doing. So there's that issue of continuity as well. You need to bring your team together and ensure that everybody is pulling in the same direction. So in practical terms, that is what I think the role of government should be. And also you have the structure itself. In Nigeria, it's a federal arrangement. You have the subnationals, but a unique federal arrangement where we all go to the center to look at resources that we use to develop our state. When we came in, the dependability of Oyo State on the federal was about 60%. So about 60% of the resources that we want to get will have to be given by the center. I've said, no, set a target. We should be reducing it to the extent that when we're leaving, that 65% should have gone to like 30%, which then means that as a subnational, we can go ahead and do things our own way. And I'm glad to say that within the first 4 years, we have reduced that dependability on the federal government to about 52, 53% now. So that to me in practical terms, and I'm sorry if I don't speak your language, it's simply because I became a practical governor, which means I have to do things, and then you have to see the result almost immediately. So that is, in my own little way, what I think the role of government should be.
Thank you so much, Governor, for that. I think we all appreciate the practicality of it, right? Beyond the vision, beyond the roadmap, what it actually means. High Commissioner Linda, I will actually switch the question around for you. So the other side of the coin, the story, or the other side of the coin when it comes to business and government, and especially business in Africa, we know the stories, right? It's exploitation, it's corruption. As a High Commissioner and as a long-serving diplomat, how do you think about ethical business in the African continent? And is it actually even possible?
Thank you, Aida. It's great to be here. And hi, everybody. Well, I actually was wanting to speak about this question.
You can do both.
But I will link it to what you said. I like the idea, government as an enabler. and providing a framework of action. But I think government is also a vision maker. So that is very important, and we've seen it in Namibia. When we became independent 34 years ago next month, we had no universities. We had the fewest schools of any African country at the time of the independence. We had very little electricity in the rural areas, and our roads were basically built for a military infrastructure to keep the war going and to dominate the population. It was not to facilitate growth and facilitate development. So the vision that we brought in was to basically build our country from scratch. And one of the principal aspects of that was ethics. We had been under a colonial system of apartheid, which was based on non-ethics, was based on non-diversity, was based on division. So the ethical principles that we brought in was unity of the country, making sure that everybody had the same access to infrastructure, to healthcare, to education. So the first thing we did was we rolled out more schools. We've now got 3 universities, and so on. But then what happened was, a few years ago, we had 7 years of drought consecutively. And as a result, our economy was severely impacted. And at that moment, as we were coming out of the drought, we were impacted by COVID-19, which completely devastated our economy. And what we then did, we said, well, especially under the leadership of the president who died 4 weeks ago, Hage Geingob, we realized we had to have a new vision for our country and for ourselves as an African nation. And so we brought in renewable energy, we brought in green hydrogen as a vision for ourselves. So we set that as a target. So what does that mean? That means that everything that we're doing has to change. Our education system has to change. Our way of organizing ourselves have to change. But at the same time, we realized we had everything in place. So one of the important things when you talk about ethics is what about the environment? What about the people? And what about your governance structures? That's what ESG is. And you know what? We've got all those laws in place. Because one of the first things we did when we became independent was look at our labor laws and make sure that our labor laws were supportive of the people. So any company that comes into Namibia would not be able to exploit people. So yes, we don't give cheap labor. Namibia is not a cheap country. But guess what? Any company that works in Namibia can tick the box that says social, because you are looking after your people. The other thing that we did was when we negotiated our constitution over 34 years ago, and it was the late president who was in charge of that process, we wrote into the constitution that any project that we do has to be environmentally friendly. In fact, we have a constitutional obligation to make sure that our environment is protected, because we have one of the most pristine and complicated environmental systems on the planet. We also have the Big Five. We have very important animals for our heritage as a planet. And so we worked into our system protection for the environment. And that means that any company that comes into Namibia can tick the box of environmental compliance, because you cannot do a project without being environmentally compliant. And you've got to prove that. And then when it comes to governance systems, we made sure, because we were so passionate, when we took over our country, we said, you know what, we're not going to be a colony any longer. We've got to run this show ourselves. And we've got to make sure that this speaks for Namibians and speaks to Namibians. So we put in place the laws. And guess what? We went through a scandal called the Fish-Rot scandal. Let me just put it out there for anybody who's going to ask that question later. But if you look for at the Fish-Rot scandal, what has that led to? It led to our Attorney General and Minister of Justice and a couple of other ministers sitting in jail right now today for corruption. So we've got the laws in place. And I remember one day there was a French minister who came to Namibia, and he actually spoke to the then Prime Minister and said, you know, we're very unhappy because our company had applied for a tender and they didn't get it. The Prime Minister said, well, if you weren't happy, why didn't the company go to a court? There are court systems in place. So if you're not happy with the way things work, challenge the process, but do it in court. There's a legal process and it works. So there's the governance tick. So what we found is we've got the ESG compliance. Guess what? There's $3 trillion out there, people, for companies that are ESG compliant. You can access and bring in to Africa, and as long as you can prove ESG compliance. But we've got companies who come into our countries and they don't want to be ESG compliant. They don't want to prove that their project is going to be environmentally friendly, that they're going to look after people, and that they're going to adhere to the laws. And so those are just some of the aspects when you talk about ethics, Aida, that that Namibia has brought to the table. And I believe that that's a rollout for our continent. We've got the AFCFTA, we've got a lot of the policies outlined by the African Union. Those policies are there. It's up to us to implement them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, High Commissioner. That was quite powerful. Government as an enabler, but we can even go further. Government as a visionary, right? And that helps set the stage for ethical business making. It can happen. High Commissioner Busingye, what do you think of all of this? Is it possible to be ethical and to do business in the African continent? And how do you see the role of your government in that space?
Thank you very much, Aida, and thank you very much for having us. We are pleased to be here. To be ethical and to run business and to run government, I believe they are all branches of the same tree. I don't think you can divorce any of those and survive. And why am I saying this? The Africa you described at the beginning of this conversation, rich, demographically good, resources, water, human, and everything, is true. But at the same time, it is the Africa my colleagues have talked about. Big chunks of the population live in darkness. They don't know electricity. They don't have piped water. Their life expectancy is short. Their vaccination and immunization of children is short. Their literacy levels are short. We still have an Africa that God created, and very much of it, we haven't transformed it into an Africa that, when God created Adam and Eve, I think he told them, go and change the world. We should have changed Africa. And we seem to be not have done that. So this is a very serious conversation. So ethics and government and private business, in my view, combine to do what the business of the people is all about. I come from Rwanda. I believe some of you might have been to Rwanda or have read about Rwanda. In 1994, we lost everything. We ticked every box for a failed state. In terms of the economy, in terms of human and natural resources, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of water and electricity, in terms of, name it, we ticked every box for a failed state. And I have been part of the government in these last 30 years. I'm a diplomat for only 2. I'll be 2 years this August. But I've been a civil servant. And I've been part of a government that saw the fortunes of people change, an economy change, infrastructure change, taxation change, Fitch and Standard & Poor's rating us B or B minus for a long time, growth at above 8% for a decade. I have seen how the private and the public sector have to work together. If the government was not upstanding in Rwanda in 1994, we would probably have continued to fail and probably eventually disappear. I don't know whether you have disappeared states. Do we ever have? Beyond the failed state, what happens? I think we would have a disappeared state. But because there was a government which was upstanding, the private sector was able to rise. Our private sector has risen, I think, remarkably, given that in 1994 there was absolutely no backbone for a private sector to thrive. So the level of government involvement in my country is another level. It's not a level for just conversation whether all as an option. It wasn't an option. For us, it was absolutely inevitable that government runs business to start up a government, to start up a country. And today, when you look at across the board, our numbers of school enrollment, our numbers in women empowerment, our women in parliament are 65%, our immunization of children, our life expectancy has jumped from 40 point something to 69.9 now, and that is between 2000 and now. So what you are talking about Africa, and I'm happy we are talking to this group of young people doing their MBA, whether you are from Africa or not from Africa, there are certain statistics that should worry you. 86,000 as of end of 2023, the migration, the IOM Missing Migrants Project. If you type it, you'll find it. Missing Migrants Project by the International Organization for Migration. At least, I think as of end of 2023, it was counting 86,000 missing. You know what missing means? That you either died in the Sahara Desert, or you sank in the Mediterranean, or you sank in the English Channel. That's what's called Missing Migrants Project. Do you know what follows after that? Just a statistic. I don't think anything else is happening, but IOM is doing a lot of advocacy for what needs to be done. Now, much of Africa, these migrants are young people. Young people, some educated, some mid-level, some poor, but all of them trying to leave Africa. The reason they want to leave Africa cannot be because Africa is rich in resources, is rich in water, is rich in minerals, is rich in all these things. I mean, that's a contradiction. Why should people from that kind of place want to leave? It should be the people in the Western world actually trying to come to Africa and stay there forever. That's what I think. So there are needs, we need to see something differently. So in terms of ethics in my country, ethics played one of the biggest roles in the way we run government. First of all, the business of leadership is a privilege. I hold it as a privilege, and every leader in my country, and I think in every other place, we hold it as a privilege. We owe it to the citizens to lead. They don't owe us anything. We owe them to lead them. And how do we owe them to lead them? By giving them a vision, by giving them things to do, by showing them where we want to go, by proving that it is the right way to do it, and by making sure that they get the results. Rwanda, by end of 2025, we plan to have not a single citizen not having electricity in their house. We're planning that. Right now, we are at 75. We are at 75%, and it's not because it is possible, it's not because it is easy, it's not because it is convenient, it is because it is wrong for a citizen to live without electricity. And the reason now electricity has become more, even more important than ever. Me, when I was born, it was in a dark house, and we only saw light because the sun comes out. That's it. But at the same time, there were no computers running around. There were no telephones running around. There were no tools that needed electricity to keep you updated, to keep you skilled, to keep you, aware of what's going on around you. So right now, if you don't give your citizens electricity, you are basically locking them out of the rest of the world, of what is around them, of how they can improve their own lot. If they don't have clean water, you are just opening them up to worms. And you are going to be treating worms more expensively than supplying them with water. So we did all this together with our citizens, and we decided whichever money we get, let's put it in education, let's put it in health, let's put it in water, let's put it in electricity, let's do some roads, and be sure that the citizen will see that there is a government working for them. Not only during the election season, because when we go for elections, we tell them we are working for you. Right? But what are you working for me if electricity is not coming towards my home? If you're not trying to see that our livelihoods are better, if we have no food security, how are we surviving? So corruption, bureaucracy, inefficiencies, those of you who have been to Rwanda, you should probably have seen that there is a huge difference in terms of how we deliver services. Because, as Ambassador Linda said, corruption in our country is not just only a crime under the law, because I think it's a crime probably everywhere in the world. But it is a very, very risky area to go in. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter you are Rwandan, it doesn't matter you are not Rwandan, it doesn't matter you are which position. Corruption is not just illegal, it is absolutely risky. When you go in it, you need to be sure.
If you do the crime,
You need to be sure that you will pay the price. And it will be the real price. And that means our country is not a rich country. It's a very poor country. But the money we get from taxes and from grants and whichever money comes in the public coffers, we are sort of sure that above 80% of it, above 90% of it is going into the things it was earmarked to go into. And these things will 70 to 80% be achieved. And we will follow until they are achieved. And what we have added lately is we now get an engagement with whoever is doing it. If it's a contractor, if it is a district, if it is whoever is doing it, we say, at what point will we see the results? Go and have a meeting with your own council and let us know at central government when results will be available. If you say 2 years, yeah, we write it. But on the second year, on the dot, who will be there? We will come to see, is it there? And if it is not there, then it won't stop there. A whole range of other things will happen. So we try to manage the resources, the meager resources we have, absolutely ethically. And by saying that, I don't mean there can never be someone going into corruption in Rwanda. They can, but it is a huge risk. It is a huge risk. You don't want to go into that area. So you young people, and I'm sorry to call you young people, I noticed there might be, all sorts of edges. But let's talk about these things very seriously. Tomorrow, you will not be MBA students, you will be workers. You will be in private sector, you will be in public sector, you will be in civil society somehow, you will be serving somewhere. And when you are serving somewhere, these statistics that Africa has, which are a contradiction, rich in everything, poor in the people, and trying to run away from Africa. I think these things should worry us every single day as a continent. And we need to be looking for solutions. And part of the solutions include us running what we run accountably, being accountable to the people, being accountable to the resources we are in charge of, and being ethical in how we are running them. Thank you, Ida.
Thank you. Thank you, High Commissioner. Sobering, yet quite inspiring as well. There's a big contradiction we need to fix. There's also another contradiction I would like to talk about. That's foreign direct investment. And all of you in your various functions, I'm sure, have had to raise money for your own countries. And the statistics are not looking very good for the African continent, right? Africa receives the least amount of foreign direct investment in the world. And that doesn't also make quite sense because the growth level in the continent are quite healthy, 4 to 7%. You don't get that in Western nations. And we've learned recently that China has cut back investment in the continent. And this was a very heated conversation in the Green Room. So I'll start with a controversial question. Do we actually really need foreign direct investment in the continent? I speak as a Senegalese citizen. Every time I go home, there's a road being built. 2 years later, it's been destroyed. And they told me it's a nation who built it. I won't say which one, right? But there seems to be a problem with this private sector investment we're getting and what is it actually doing for the country. Ambassador Boateng, I'll put you on the spot because you've been the ambassador to Ghana in China, and I'm sure you've had a lot of experience having had to negotiate these foreign direct investment deals. What's your view?
Well, thank you, Ida. I think the Africa Continental Free Trade is the game changer for us. I mean, if I'm from West Africa, Ghana. If we look at our market alone, it's over $1 trillion in terms of value. But how much trade is Ghana doing with our immediate neighbors, even Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso? It's negligible. I think for a long time we've looked outside for the solution to our problems. But the solution to our problems are internal. That's why I like your motto, impact from within. Yeah. When I set off on, I like to say, my Africa journey, a lot of my mates at that time, it was not fashionable to say you wanted to work in Africa because we're in the US and it was easy. But like my father used to tell us all the time, if it's easy, anybody can do it. If it's easy, anybody can do it. When we went into Africa in the 90s, telecommunication wasn't there. Today, MTN is a giant. It was done during my lifetime. Vodafone came from outside into Africa, but it did very well. DSTV. You look at today, African music is recognized at the Oscars, at the Emmys. If somebody had told me in 1995, 98, it was a very far-fetched dream. So our leaders of today have created the platform called the Africa Continental Free Trade. For those of you in this room, it's a huge opportunity. But there are problems. We all have very, very different, small, soft currencies. I think some of you here should be looking at the models. I think our first speaker said it yesterday. We cannot continue to import over 60, 70% of the things that we use. Why can't we do them internally? Why can't Ghana and Burkina Faso sit and agree that you grow tomatoes, I grow onions, we exchange? Why can't we sit down with Cote d'Ivoire and say, you grow this, I grow this, we exchange. That, for me, is the beginning. I remember I visited a Chinese village. Then I realized that they were only selling one product. Then I went to the next village and they were selling the other. So I said, why are you not selling pepper, yam? I said, no, if we do that, how are we going to trade amongst ourselves? So the opportunity is there, but I believe that we need to think differently. We cannot continue to do things the same way and expect different results. We have to be innovative. And God has given us everything that we need. I think we, especially you, the young people, have to step up to the table, just like some of us did 30 years ago. You have to, and you will not lose. That I can tell you. I was much more successful than all my mates that I left in the US. In fact, I ended up employing some of them. That is the truth. So if the Chinese can do it, because when I went to China in 1992, China was poorer than my city of Accra. That was just 1992. I went back 30 years later as an ambassador in my district of Chaoyang, where most of the ambassadors live. The GDP was higher than the entire of sub-Saharan Africa. How did they do it? They leveraged technology. And today, technology is there for us to use. You are in the best environment that God can give any human being. You're at Oxford. You're the brightest brains. You're using the best technology. Please take it back and change your environment. Not all of us will become very, very rich. But if you can change your family, you can change your own community, you can change the school you went to, or your own little circle, will begin to move in the right direction. I think there's an over-reliance on people solving our problems for us. But business is not charity. Whether it's the Americans coming in, or whether it's the British, or whether it's the Chinese, if you close your eyes, they'll take advantage of you. And I'm always surprised when I sit in meetings and people believe that people should be doing things for us because of they are nice people. They're not. So we should also take that attitude. And I think the Africa Continental Free Trade, for me, it's a lot of political talk now. It has to be an economic talk. It has to be an economic talk. Otherwise, if we allow it to fail, it will be disastrous. I mean, I was in meetings when the OAU was being changed to the AU. We had these same conversations. I was very young. I was very happy. What happened to the AU? What has happened to ECOWAS? What has happened to SADC? So we need to make these institutions work. Now, when we talk about corruption, I mean, like Ambassador said, let's make corruption risky. And the only way we can do it is also through enhancing technology. It's through making sure that we deepen our governance and transparency processes. It's the people here who can do it. You are the ones who can do it. Yeah. You know.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Very uplifting words. But, okay.
We shouldn't rely on those foreign contractors.
We shouldn't?
No.
Okay.
We should rely on our own contractors, but also hold them accountable.
Yes.
Hold them accountable.
Okay, but we still need to raise money internationally, right? So
we do, but I think no country in the world, whether it's the US or China, has developed without foreign direct investment. I think there is also a lot of hypocrisy in the world.
Yeah.
If you look at Africa's debt ceiling, and that was what the first speaker talked about yesterday. This is 54 countries. How much is about 1.8 trillion? How much does Germany owe? How much does the UK owe? Even some companies like Tesla, how much do they owe? But it's because we are dependent on them. We have to break it. We have to break it, and that means that we need serious analytical thinkers to take us out of that Pandora box. And once we get out of it, it's amazing what we can achieve. And that's why I believe that it's important that being in this environment, you go back and see how you can change it. I once asked a Chinese colleague that, how did you guys build all these fast trains. They have the largest train network in the world, for those of you who have been to China. He said, you know, when they sold it to us, they thought we couldn't do it. We dismantled it. We took our people to all these schools. They came back with the knowledge. And that's what you see, Ambassador. Why can't we do that in Ghana? We have Ghanaian students here. What will be your impact 20 years from today, 30 years from today, looking back that this is what I brought from Oxford and this is how I changed my environment? Because we can do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador. High Commissioner Busingye, I might go to you on that one, right? We need it, as you said, but we should also look inward. How, in your experience, Rwanda has managed to leverage foreign direct investment in a way that has been productive for the country and empowering as well to the local private sector?
Thank you, Ida. I think I would very much agree with my brother, Edward. Foreign direct investment is someone's money who is just seated outside of your country. That's what makes it foreign direct money. That's it. Someone who is inside Rwanda with his own money, who wants to do an investment, that money is not called foreign direct investment, but it is direct investment, right? Foreign direct investment, someone who is not in Rwanda, who wants to come to Rwanda, will very much look at Rwanda rather than Rwanda looking at him, because Rwanda doesn't know him. All Rwanda needs to do is to prepare itself, set yourself up to be nice. Your regulatory, your institutional, your justice, your ease of doing business, you know, all these things that need to be in the right place, so that foreign direct investment, which is moving, looking for the right place to put money, they can choose you. Because foreign direct investment will look at the whole world, not just Rwanda. They will choose you. My country had very few things to be elected for. Every serious foreign investor would not look at Rwanda. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, nobody really wanted to look at Rwanda. What for? You wouldn't be able to connect by road. You wouldn't be able to connect by telecoms. You wouldn't have, you know, the environment. There were many things that would militate against you investing money in Rwanda. And we embarked on having an environment that will attract a foreign investor. And today, when we see that there is foreign investment on the increase, that there is tourism happening, people wanting to come and visit Rwanda. Gracious, we are so privileged, we feel so humbled that there are people, we have 7 flights out of Heathrow to Rwanda by our airline every night, plus many other airlines. When I check, they tell me they are full. You people, let me tell you how humbled I become when I get that kind of information. Now, in other countries, that is a norm, that's normal. But for me, I'm always informed by where we come from. Because where we come from, we didn't think anybody would start falling in love with Rwanda. And when people show that they respond to what you have set up your country to look like, you feel that you have done some good work. But in the absence, let's say foreign direct investment goes low, and you have issues. You need money. At the same time, you need to be developing your own domestic capability to invest. Your own capability from your own savings, from your own initiatives, from creating funds and looking for donations into them, and looking for how to save into those funds, which we have been trying, to be able to push your own domestic investment. I think that balance always needs to be happening. But foreign direct investment is necessary, imperative. How we present ourselves, how we want it to be channeled is so important. The third thing is that we determine where we want to focus as a country. We determine our priorities. We determine where, if we get money, this is where really we want to mobilize. If you find me on a mobilization mission in London, I thought I would talk about it later, but let me talk about it now. Diplomats have changed. Long ago, we used to exchange what we call note verbal, the documents between governments, and you have banquets and evenings and so on. But now, diplomats are doing business. You have to go and mobilize people. You have to go and convince people that your country is the best country in the world for doing business. So when you are going to do that, and you are backed with very good statistics about ease of doing business, about how quick you can register a company. In Rwanda, you register a company within, I think, 10 hours now. You have your company registered, and the following 24 hours, you can start your business. If you fail or don't fail, that's a different matter. But if you want to file your company, if you want to register a company, you should be able to register a company within a maximum of 48 hours. You should have your company. And you don't go from office to office, meeting bureaucrats upon bureaucrats. You go to a one-stop shop. You leave everything there, whatever you want, and either you are in your hotel room, they'll let you know that your company is registered, this is your registration number, and these are all the information you need to know, and you can start working if you want. So we save you from walking from one office on environment to another office on this requirement, to another office on another requirement. We save you that journey and that bureaucracy, and perhaps that personal you have to clear with individuals. Instead, you clear with the system. And that sort of works to an advantage of both of us. As a country, it is quick. And for you as a foreign direct investor, it is not just quick, but it saves you money. And it also, in terms of fighting corruption, and in terms of fighting bureaucracy, and in terms of fighting all these things which come from direct personal connections at 10 different points, we save you all those 9. So in other words, we are also saving our own selves from these personal temptations. When you make it 1 instead of 10, you are saving yourself of 9. Yes. So the question of foreign direct investment is so important. It will take our economies to the next level, but foreign direct investment chooses where to go on the basis of how you look like and how they feel safe with their money. It wants to go where they will make money, their profit and so on, where they will repatriate it easily, and where the general ease of doing business and the environment of how safe and how fast things are is a good environment for them. So that is a combination of all that makes your economy good for foreign direct investment, or not very good for foreign direct investment. Now, for Africa as a continent, I think we have this huge opportunity that has been there, but with emerging technologies, with awareness, with a lot of information across the board, I think we have an opportunity of a lifetime. And we need to grab it right away.
Thank you so much, Commissioner,
Thank you.
for that. Thank you. I'll actually move to you, Governor Makinde, if you don't mind, and we have a question from the audience. We're tight on time, so I'm trying to squeeze in 2 more questions. I'm being ambitious. We need to look within. Foreign direct investment is important, and we need to create the right framework to attract it. And we have a question from Abdul Karim, who's saying, what are the actions that have been taken at the governors forum level to collectively agree on right-of-way fees, ensuring support for investment and internet penetration in Nigeria, given the discrepancies among the states? And I think that speaks really to this bigger idea of how do we empower the local champion, the local African champion? Okay,
well, thank you, Haida. I've been looking at the time as well. In between Ambassador Boateng and Busiri, they spent almost 40 minutes. So I will answer your question, but the theme of this get-together is shaping tomorrow the crucial role of African governments. And these are individuals who may be looking at, what's going to happen to their career next. So I'll speak to that quickly. Then I'll answer the question. And I hope 2 of us have been marginalized, but don't worry. First, all these issues that we're talking about, no electricity, infrastructure is weak, pipe-borne water, technology, they are opportunities. Some people will have to put those things in. And because they will put those things in, they will have fun and a lot of money doing that. So I want to encourage you. You look towards Africa. Yes, there are challenges. There are things, and as your government were aware, several years back, like I said, I've only been in the public space for 5 years. Several years back, we were working on the Chad-Cameroon pipeline project. And I had to send engineers to Chad from Nigeria. They will first of all have to fly from Lagos to Paris, and then Paris back to N'Djamena. I mean, that is, whichever way you want to calculate it in terms of money, carbon footprint, and all of that, is not what to do. Now, AFCTA is saying, let us collaborate amongst ourselves. Let it be that infrastructure that are going to integrate the continent, will have to be, and that is the actual time that you start seeing a positive shift on the continent. So I want to encourage you that please don't look at these challenges as a barrier. See them as opportunities. Now to your question, because we have 1 minute left.
And we will get to High Commissioner Linda Scott. I will be in trouble, but we will get to...
Yes, at the NGF level, just to address that question. And the individual that asked this question can still get back to me on a private level. I will explain. We had challenges in terms of the costing, unified costing. In Oyo State, for instance, I did not agree with the costing proposed by the NGF. And I said, look, I want internet penetration, I want the fiber optics to be laid, but on conditions and terms that are acceptable to me. And we've been having that engagement. So as of now, you have to engage either at the regional level or at individual state level. But the opportunities, they still exist in there. Sorry, the time is gone.
Thank you. But we still have one more question that I've been allowed to ask. But thank you so much, Governor, for that. The potential is still there. High Commissioner Linda, you will have the last word of this session. And I have 2 questions for you in 0 time we have left. So it's a challenge. The first is, we didn't touch on innovation, but it did come through the answers. And I just was wondering if you could speak more about the work that Namibia is doing on green hydrogen and the importance of that. And second, you have an audience here of young Africans, the best of the continent, our most brilliant minds here at Oxford, who are thinking about what's the future, right? And you've led the career of service for your country. So I would love for you to talk about the future for Namibia, what you're doing on hydrogen, but also what is your last word to this group?
Thank you, Aida. And thank you, Governor, for standing up for our rights. So, you know, Namibia, as I said, came out of a place where we were really hard-pressed economically. And if you look at our growth in the last quarter, we were up by 7% growth. We're expecting over the next year to have 4% growth and so on. So the prospects are looking pretty good in Namibia, and this is because we went with this vision. So I'm going to combine the 2 questions. So when we were under colonialism, we were a very small population. You may know or you may not know that Namibia had the first genocide committed on its soil at the beginning of the 20th century, 1903 to 1908. 80,000 people were killed by the Germans. And that has had an impact on us. But in that environment where you have a country the size of, just about the size of Nigeria, but we have 2.5 million people at this point. At that time, we were much smaller. 1948, the South Africans declared us a 5th province, made us a colony. And we were under the machinery of the South African system. It was much bigger. South Africa today is 60 million people. So what gave the Namibian people the right to think that they could be independent? This massive country with few people, second least densely populated country on the planet. It was because of a vision of a few people that were leaders and really inspired people. So when I look at young people, I say, what is the vision that you're giving to yourself? And what is the vision that you're giving to the future? When we look at green hydrogen, we look at renewables. Why is that green hydrogen so important? When I spoke the December before last at the International Maritime Organization, there were some countries that said, but Namibia, why are you deciding to go down the green hydrogen route? What makes you so special? What has made you decide to put your neck on the line? And I said, well, the thing is that somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to stand up for climate change. Somebody's going to stand up for development in Africa. And you know what? That green hydrogen means that we've got to have certain links between education and industry. That's something that's been missing, is the link between industry and education. Namibia right now, we've got 50,000 unemployed graduates. That means that there's been, you know, the government did their job, they educated the people. The parents did their job, they paid for their education, they made sure those kids were fed and whatnot. And the system did its job, those people got educated. But the problem is that they were educated in something that was not linked to the business and the future vision. So now we've got to correct that. Let's take Wales as an example. I love the example of Wales, which was a coal mining industry country. The entire country was focused on coal mining. Today, when you go to Wales, everybody's been reskilled. That's what we've got to do in Namibia and in Africa. We've got to reskill based on a vision. And I think what we've spoken about here today, Aida, is a vision for an Africa that we all can buy into. And I really call on young people, go and look at what you can do, what you can give back to your country, what you can give back to the continent. There are opportunities, and you know what? Africa is the future. Africa is the future.
We will leave it at that. Thank you so much, Excellencies, for such a wonderful conversation. It could have gone on for hours and hours and probably a more equal time of speaking, but we're getting our learnings. Thank you, and all our respects. Thank you.